So, yes, we have joined us for a Windows 10 community discussion. We had one previously and decided it might be a good idea to do one every time we have a new feature update from Microsoft. So, we have now had the Creators Update, which came out about sort of 5 or 6 weeks ago, I think now. And on the line, I have myself, James Rankin. We have Simon Binder. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Simon from Sweden, and Rene from Switzerland, and from a pub toilet somewhere in Kingston, we have Dan, which is, I wish we could get some sort of video going on there, because that was...
No, you don't.
Excellent.
If I do have my pants on.
Oh,
or do I?
Oh, that's one thing we're going to have to just leave to everyone's collective imaginations out there. There aren't actually any disabled people or people in wheelchairs in that particular pub, Dan, are there? But just out of interest, that you may have noticed too. Actually, I've just thought, you've been to a user group today, which probably means you've had a few beers. So is the fact you're in a disabled toilet a kind of a tactical move from your perspective? Just in case.
There's an element of strategy and tactical.
Yeah, if we see you go on mute, we'll know what's going on there. Oh, you may not go on mute. That's anyway. All that wonderful imagery aside, right? We do have the Windows 10 Creators Update now. So, I mean, we're going to talk about this not necessarily from a kind of EUC or VDI perspective, really. I mean, that's obviously a lot of us here do work around EUC, so we can sort of touch on that as well. But the Creators Update, the first thing I want to probably just throw out there is it's called the Creators Update, which kind of makes you think that there's all sorts of wonderful things in there that let you do all sorts of more productive things. But the main sort of thing I see from my perspective of just doing testing on it is there's not really a lot more kind of new stuff in there. The biggest thing I can see is there's a lot of improvements in Edge, and when I say improvements, it's kind of coming on to what we'd expect a browser to be. Is there anything else that other people are saying there, or Simon, what you think are the sort of key features from an enterprise sort of perspective? I think the main thing I've seen is it's becoming a bit more refined, really, and a bit more kind of enterprise usable, as it were. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, and from an enterprise perspective, we actually got several new policies that we're able to apply, regardless of how we manage the OS. Especially if you look from an MDM point of view, you got a lot of new features coming to Intune and other MDM systems, basically, that enables you to lightly manage Windows. So it's coming in a bit under the radar, but that's from an enterprise point of view, that's quite large to look at. From a creator's point of view, the most obvious thing is probably Paint 3D. So I can do worthless doodles in 3D now instead of 2D.
Oh, well, that's... I mean, there's all this kind of Windows inking sort of stuff in there. And the other day I was I was actually looking to do a diagram, and I kind of sketched it out. And for a change, it was actually quite good. And I ended up actually going off and scanning the thing and using it rather than doing a Visio diagram. And I did think, yeah, it might have been quite cool just to be able to draw on a tablet or something like that. But again, it's a bit of a niche thing, really, isn't it? Really, at the moment, almost that sort of side of things.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think Microsoft could have been, I believe that they would have liked the Creators Update to be a bit more creative. If we look back to the event they held in October or whatever, when they showed the 3D scanning app for phones and so on, I believe they had a wish to make it more creative for creators in that perspective. And then I guess they ended up doing it stable, which I love from an enterprise point of view. They have really put her back into it and made it easier and better in the upgrades. But also, I listened to Windows Weekly a few episodes ago when Donna Sakar was on from Windows Insider, and she explained it in a rather good way that creators, as you may have heard, are more than just creative artists. It could be programmers or whatever. And from that point of view, it makes a bit more sense when you look at Bash and stuff, which we have, and a lot of improvements to that. So I believe that Microsoft would have liked it to be more creative, but to get creators like anyone who creates anything, yeah, then it's a creative update.
It's quite interesting, I think, that the next update is actually going to be called the Fall Creators Update, which is a bit weird because we've already had a Creators Update and we've got a new one. And they've used the word Fall, which again is a bit US-centric, which I found a bit strange. But it's interesting that you mentioned though the MDM side of thing, because I think I think we touched on this before. Are Microsoft trying to say MDM is the way to manage things and GPOs are a bit deprecated? Now, I read something that says GPO is still the preferred way to manage a domain joined machine, but because we've got the whole Azure AD and the kind of almost, where you can bring your own machine and you don't necessarily have to join an AD anyway, is MDM going to be kind of like the new sort of way of managing your devices because they don't necessarily need to be joined to a domain anymore? Because a domain's it's grown beyond what it was originally, hasn't it? It's more like a whole set of federated identity services really now, rather than what we would consider a domain going back to the NT4 days.
Yeah, and that's completely right. As I see it, and I know that some of my colleagues and Microsoft, for one, not agree with this, but as I see it, we will be using domains for quite a while, moving forward in some way or form. But and I believe it was Jörgen Nilsson, who is Windows MVP or Enterprise Mobility MVP, that said that every project where you move from anything to Windows 10 should include an Azure AD joined branch, so to say, because many of the pieces we are migrating could actually be joined to Azure AD and managed by MDM, and the user wouldn't notice any difference at all. So yeah, from a Microsoft point of view, MDM would be the preferred way to do it. There are benefits to that, of course, but using legacy applications, we won't be able to get rid of AD and GPOs and so on for quite a while. But I guess that's basically where virtualization of apps and desktop comes in, because as I see it, that's, and as VMware put it, it's the bridge from the legacy way to manage Windows to the new modern way to manage Windows, regardless of what technology you use. And application virtualization could be a way to bridge those worlds.
That's an interesting one, possibly to throw out at you, Dan, because I know you've got quite a big environment that has embraced app virtualization. But obviously, do you see yourself moving away towards the more sort of cloudy sort of stuff out there?
So basically, every single one of our Windows 10 devices are going to be in Active Directory and Azure AD. So we're going to be running hybrid because we've got so much legacy, and that's not going away anywhere soon. We're going to have Active Directory for 5 to 10 years to come. So we need the best of both worlds, and what Azure AD gives us is it basically gives us the single sign-on to most of our cloud-based services. So we use Box, for example, for cloud storage, plus some of our student learning environments and some of the HR systems and things like that are also federated through Azure. So from a Windows 10 perspective, if the device is in both Active Directory and Azure, they get true single sign-on, seamless sign-on as well. So from my point of view, I don't think there's one or the other, not yet anyway. I think it's going to be, people move to a hybrid model. Yep. I also think with Azure, and forget about MDM for a while, I mean, seeing where they're taking things like enterprise state roaming as well. Yes. Now, it's very early, it's very, very early, and it's a bit clunky, and it's not as fast as you would like. It's certainly no substitute for Res or AppSense or any of those sort of players, but you can see where Microsoft are trying to push it, and it's certainly the future, I think, but I still think there's a few years of maturity that we have to go through to get there. But it also depends on your use case. So I reckon there's a good percentage of our users where MDM and Windows 10 on a mobile device is probably a great step forwards. Ultimately, we're a university, so we have a lot of fat desktops, and in almost every user feedback survey that we do, students are asking for more physical desktops rather than laptops. They don't like carrying devices in, so it sort of breaks the norm a little bit, our population. In terms of what users want, well, ultimately they want data and applications, and they want it to be secure, and we want to do it in a compliant way. So application virtualization is a key part of that as well. So I think there isn't a silver bullet to this. It's very much about a blended hybrid approach. Forgive me if I'm dribbling on. I am drunk.
No, that's fine. What I was going to say is the Windows 10 Creators Update, it's quite right. It does feel that it's almost looks like Simon's dropped off there. He must have had now. Oh no, he's back. Sorry, what was boredom, Dad? Yeah, sorry, I've completely forgotten what I was saying now. Yeah, Windows 10 Creators Update does feel a bit kind of sort of hybrid-y, because one of the other things I've noticed about it is the kind of the settings app instead of the control panel is now presented to you on the WinX menu. And basically, once you start digging through the settings app, occasionally once you get into the more advanced settings, you'll find yourself back in the old control panel. So it's almost as if, and I think this is Microsoft are kind of in the process of trying to rewrite everything from the control panel into that settings modern app, but they haven't quite got there yet. And there's also a few sort of stragglers, you know, people like sort of Java stuff and things like that that bung their own control panel applets in that'll need to be sort of bundled along.
Absolutely.
So I think that's they are going to shove you completely down that route in the end. It's just a bit annoying for me as an admin trying to just literally trying to relearn everything within that settings app that makes it feel a bit funny, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you try, our support guys get very frustrated because it seems like they've adopted the Apple mentality where there's a complete update every couple of months almost, and you've effectively got to relearn a bunch of things, or all your UAT or OAT cycles completely change. You've got to completely change the model of signing off a new image now. It does present some challenges as well. But I don't just think it's things like the control panel. I mean, you're seeing a complete shift in other things in Creators updates. So PowerShell's now the normal. Command prompt isn't there either. That they're trying to hide some of that away now.
I noticed that is the sort of thing. But I mean, everything's still there. It's just, if you're a kind of
you have to find it.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to go and dig it up yourself.
Or you have to hack the Windows X menu. You have showed us how to do this, James.
I did, yes. That was
it's quite a lot of work to do.
It is, and I was very lucky I'd found some random guy on the internet who'd written a tool to do it, because if it had come down to it, I was actually on the verge of giving up. But I mean, I can almost understand that. I can very much understand that Microsoft wouldn't, because can you remember when every single program used to like dump an icon into the system tray, and once you'd installed a few things, you had a giant system tray. I think Microsoft were very aware they didn't want everybody dropping their stuff into that WinX menu, because it would just become total overkill. But it would have been nice, not necessarily to allow you to actually change it, but maybe to just give you some options to mix and match it around a bit. So I'm hoping that's something, because that is very almost like kind of a power user kind of menu. It's really almost specifically designed for admins, I think, and from an admin perspective, it would maybe be nice to be able to customize that. So that's hopefully something that they may get on and put in eventually. But yeah, as I said, the Creators Update as a whole, I think it does feel, like Simon was saying, it feels more stable, it feels a bit more refined. They've started bringing things in that, like Edge now supports various things that you would have expected it to have out of the box, mainly, which is, I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but there's also, other things there as well. Another thing that kind of annoys me a little bit about the Creators Update in general is that there's a lot more sort of little ads being slipped in left, right, and centre. There's an ad in File Explorer around OneDrive, and I fired Edge up the other day, and it gave me a graph of some statistics showing me how it was so much better than Chrome and Firefox based around some Google stats. I mean, I know you can turn them off, but again, it's just things that you've got to go in and sort of shut down afterwards. So what's everyone's opinion on those kind of integrated ads within the operating system? Are they
there on the Enterprise edition?
This was Enterprise I was using the other day. It was Enterprise Eval.
Yeah, and it's only, I believe, education that has the apps turned off as default. In enterprise, you need to turn them off as well, which I feel is quite stupid.
Yep.
I totally get it when you run Pro or Home, because that's the kind of devices you would buy at your regular electronic store, and then they would like ads to be shown. It makes sense to me, but in enterprise and education, I believe that they should turn it off as default as much as possible.
Yeah, it's, I had to go digging again in group policy objects to find various things, and it's nice that the group policy objects are there, because I remember in the earlier versions of Windows 10 I was having to sit and find how to turn them off in the interface and monitor registry keys and whatnot, which was just a big horrible pain in the backside, basically. But yeah, it was Edge that I fired up the other day, and it's even got an Internet Explorer now. There's an Edge tab next to the new tab bit that says, would you like to use Edge instead? Again, you can turn that off, but it's you know, it's just adding more to the testing cycle of sort of ferreting out all of these things. So it'd be nice just for a tick box at installation time, maybe, that says, you know, turn off integrated advertising because we're a business and we don't really want to disrupt our users' productivity in that way.
Yep, I agree.
Have you tried upgrading from the anniversary update to the creators update? We found that in our test that it, you know, even though we went out of our way to get rid of OneDrive started coming back again.
Well, they did say that they'd start honouring any modern app removal now. So if you removed a modern app, then on that. But OneDrive is interesting. What I did notice is you can uninstall Internet Explorer now on the Creators Update. Did you notice that? You can actually remove Internet Explorer. And I thought it was just going to remove the shortcuts. But when I tried to run iExplore.exe, it wasn't there anymore. Yeah, if you dig into optional features, I think it's called, on the in the settings app, there is a thing that says remove Internet Explorer, and it looks like it does actually remove it. Is that almost Microsoft trying to get us ready for Edge to take over by actually decoupling IE finally from the operating system? So that was quite an interesting one. So, but OneDrive, yeah. Does OneDrive in your testing came back? I mean, we did see some horrid. There's lots of issues around some of the kind of the how would you describe them? The more hooky apps out there, like the likes of AppSense has a few issues when you do an upgrade. It tends to break the agents on there and things like that. And I know Res had some similar kind of issues as well, didn't they, from compatibility area?
They did, although to be fair, we didn't see it. Res actually was one of the products that worked fairly well, but most of the agent-based things had to be reinstalled. So things like the box plugins, the jukebox player had to be reinstalled, and some other bits and pieces as well. So it wasn't seamless, and it's one of those things I certainly wouldn't try and roll out anytime soon.
That's quite interesting, actually, because I think the whole idea was that Microsoft are trying to make it, and I mean, you've got all your apps virtualized, or near enough most of them, as I know. So for it to actually break the actual agent that controls the connection to those apps is a bit of a nightmare, really, because that's literally the one you don't want it to break, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. So I mean, you know, we know how to fix it. But still, it's another thing for us to have to figure out and automate and test to make sure it works. And in an environment where you've got such a diverse user base, you know, not one machine's the same. Image sprawl happens very, very quickly in our environment, so it's very hard to stay on top of.
What sort of a percentage hit did you get around that kind of sort of failures on there? Was it quite big, or?
Well, we've not rolled Windows 10 out in production yet. So,
oh, so it was just the testing. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a lie. We've got about 300 Windows 10 devices, but slightly different use case. But yeah, so it happened on every one on our test bench that we tried it on. So, and that was 5 desktops, 5 laptops.
But Daniel, will you do upgrades, or will you rebuild a new image from scratch and roll out a completely new image?
We are most likely going to roll out a completely new image.
I thought so.
yeah. It's too much of a ball ache to try and do it the Microsoft way, so we'll do it our own way.
Well, that's interesting because I think the whole focus from Microsoft, even in some of the white papers I read, was to say we're trying to make it so much easier. We were aware it's a nightmare, but that you can't really kind of sort of legislate for the vast diversity of Windows environments that you've got out there. It's going to be very difficult. I know Durham University, the guys up there had some problems with their AppSense agents that they asked me to have a look at, which is a bit odd because I don't work there anymore. But I'm a nice lad and I do favours for people from time to time, so I'm kind of helping them out with that at the minute. But it's the, as I say, if it busted a kind of I don't know, 4 or 5 kind of maybe even sort of line of business apps, you could possibly deal with it. But what it seems to be breaking are the things that provision the access to, you know, profiles or applications and things like that, which is a bit of a bigger worry because they're the key parts that you were relying on to make, you know, make this whole process a bit more seamless, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and in this case, I would actually welcome a bit more transparency from both Microsoft and the app developers. Just to, we know from Microsoft side, we have tried to fix this, but we see that these apps are failing, and this is the reason why. We are working together with the developers to solve this from either Microsoft side or the developer side. Because that's, to keep saying everything will work, which, to be completely honest, I usually say not everything, but most things will work. Yeah, that's good. But I would actually love to see Microsoft saying, yeah, we know that most things will work, but these things won't, and this is the reason why, and we're working to fix it. And that's something I like, and that's why we have the current branch, or whatever they are calling it now. I think that's a discussion we could linger into later on. But I would like to see that kind of transparency, like what actually breaks an in-place upgrade, so that we may learn from that and like make sure it doesn't happen to our apps.
Yeah, that's interesting because they've got this whole upgrade analytics thing, haven't they? Basically, they're collecting the data on it and you let it. So it might be, if you could feed that into some sort of portal. Now, I know that's going to open all sorts of cans of worms because, you know, you've got rival companies out there who do the same sort of things and they're after the same bits of business. So I don't know how likely it would actually be to happen. But in a utopia, that would be really good for them to actually say, look, here's the statistics on product X. That's how many failures we've looked at. That's what we've attributed it to. We worked with the developer. That's when this fix might be available, and it might let people avoid these sorts of things to be able almost to stage their upgrades based around that kind of global telemetry, really.
Yeah, but then again, we need to have more organizations enabling telemetry, because from what I hear and see out of my customers, at least in Sweden, many of them are still disabling telemetry, and that's why we're missing key enterprise apps. So that's one of the things we are working quite hard with, to make organizations realize that it's actually good for them to use upgrade analytics and enable at least that basic kind of telemetry, because it won't leak any vital data to anyone else, and they can actually benefit from their own telemetry.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think at Citrix Synergy we saw Citrix announcing an analytics service which was a bit more security focused. It was kind of almost designed to like identify users who were, you know, possibly stealing data from the organization or anything like that. But the idea was everybody had the kind of knee-jerk reaction that they do, you know, when you say you're looking at our data and you're analyzing it, you're stealing our data. But I think it was Jim Moyle who tweeted out saying, what you need to do is take something like this and first of all show the businesses the benefits, show them what they're going to get, show them the data that they're going to have access to, and prove to them that you're not, you are anonymizing it to whatever extent in certain parts of your data will be protected or encrypted or whatever. And if you can show them the benefits in that way and then what it's feeding into and what it's driving, what return it's driving, then you probably would see much more uptake. Because you're right, at the minute, I mean, even I do when I'm just building a Windows 10 image, it's like, yeah, just switch it all off, because we've got this knee-jerk reaction that it's not for our benefit, it's for theirs. So yeah, that's the way that I think would possibly vary it. But I mean, if you can't get people to buy into it, then that's the difficult part. But it would be really good to say that. So anyway, I'm just going to quickly slightly change tack because I know the creators updates brought, well, something else along really, which is Windows 10 S, which is an interesting play from Microsoft, which for anybody who doesn't know, is obviously the kind of they're intended to be kind of the Chromebook competitor. And if I'm right, Windows 10 S, you can basically install it, and all it will do is kind of like a Chromebook, but it'll just run apps from the Windows Store rather than the Google Play Store. And you can pay £50 or $50, I think, which entitles you to an upgrade to the full version, which means you can install apps that are not from the Windows Store. But Dan, you're in the education arena, so I guess this is almost aimed at your sort of your sort of vertical. Do you see that Windows 10 S has got any legs in it, or
no? Can you hear me?
I can, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not really. I mean, everybody thought the Chromebook was going to be this massive thing in education, and the only person that we can find on with the Chromebook now is actually one of our librarians. There was a small spike.
Did you do a search? Did you go Chromebook hunting one day?
We did. So we get all the device stats from the wireless network, so we can actually see the sort of the different devices that are out there. And you know, we have 88,000 device connections a week on our wireless network. So we get to see a good study of what the popular devices are. And Chromebook, you know, there's a small peak of a couple of hundred in the first 6 months when it was released, then it died out. And I think, certainly from our point of view, we don't really have users with basic needs. We have users that need access to AutoCAD and SPSS and SolidWorks and the Adobe Suite. And quite frankly, while you've got those legacy apps, users are going to want to access those legacy apps. And doing it through a virtual desktop, no matter how good your vGPU environment is sometimes still not appropriate on these devices. And to be fair, most of our students seem to get MacBook Pros anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. In higher education, I don't see it taking off personally, but then I could see how in some schools and then colleges and then in years to come, that sort of form factor, that sort of cut down version will be accessible, start being the norm. But I just don't think there's enough apps in the store. I don't think it's mature enough at this moment in time. Well, yeah,
that's another point. The actual whole app store itself on the Windows Store. But one I have actually noticed in a couple of, as I say, it's almost like they've aimed at education, but just up the road from me in Northumberland Council, actually, I was quite astounded to find out, have gone fully Chromebook right across the board, and they've got all their users just using sort of Google Apps and stuff like that. So that's the first sort of big Chromebook deployment I've seen. So, as you say, it's interesting that Microsoft have got into this game, but the whole problem we've got, as you said there, Dan, is how many apps are there going to be in the store? Because I mean, the Chromebook has now got the whole Android store, hasn't it, behind it? So you can get just about anything on a Chromebook, really, that you need.
It has, and what a lot of the time, one of the big things that I think is forgotten is printers, universal print drivers. How do you get the drivers onto the device? How do you manage the devices in that sort of more traditional way? I think traditional management is still needed even in the modern age. And I know for a fact that a lot of our print partners that we use, that they've got no intention of supporting it on their roadmap. Not until they see demand, and I just don't think the demand's going to be there. So then we have to come up with interesting web print solutions or email print solutions, and I hope the user doesn't have any crazy format in the document. It's not. I don't see it being a big thing.
For us, Chromebooks are interesting devices as a low-cost thin clients. We have a bunch of them in our college and use them as a mobile device pooled devices and give them out to our students. They use them as thin clients to access the VDI.
So you would potentially be able to use a kind of a Windows 10S device because you've got the Citrix receiver now, haven't you? So that would possibly be an option for yourselves.
Yeah, maybe, but there's no benefit, I think. Chromebooks do a good job for this, and let's see. It's a question of the price, I think, by the end of the day.
I mean, ultimately, yeah, money talks at the end of the day, doesn't it? If they release it for like 150 quid, then it becomes a bit more compelling for those cheap devices.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we will see those perhaps not down to £150, but around 200 perhaps for Windows 10s. And I see the good thing about them are actually that it's Windows. Many will be familiar with it from the start, and I think it's something in it when we see that Microsoft are bringing iTunes as an app, we see Spotify as an app, and we will see Office as modern apps, but with the full Office capabilities. And for some, for pooled PCs, as you're saying, Rene, I really see a benefit of them. For one to personal devices, I believe that we will see some challenges with that from a user point of view, because they still would like to use some other applications that aren't in the store. Yeah. Most obviously Chrome. I for one love Edge. I know that I'm quite lonely in that camp. But
listen, I'm in a disabled toilet. You're not that lonely.
Yeah, but you're not using Edge, Dan, are you?
Exactly. That's quite horrible. I'm more lonely than the guy in a disabled toilet. Yeah, and that's actually a huge challenge as far as I see it. If they could bring Chrome as well, I believe most people actually would cope quite well with a Windows 10s device, because that's in reality what people are using. Chrome, iTunes for some reason, and Office, and then they can use Edge or Chrome or whatever. I think that's it makes sense, but I think again it will take time. And I said the same thing about Windows RT. I'll be honest with that as well. I was one of the 200 people in the world that bought a Windows RT device, but I still use it. But again, I use a Windows Phone as well, so I'm used to a limited amount of apps.
You are lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. To use Edge, Windows Phone, and Windows RT, that must make me quite unique.
Yeah, that's quite. To find someone who ticks all of those boxes, it's quite. You'd get good odds on that, I think. Really, I mean, I've still got a BlackBerry, but at least that runs Android now, so I'm still I'm on board with the whole thing. But I mean, the thing with Windows 10s as well is it's kind of. I don't know, this is just me talking, but I'm used to I'd have to probably pay the extra 50 quid to just get it to be able to install the sort of legacy apps, because I'm so used to Windows as a sort of system where I can just go and grab everything I need off the internet and just install it. The whole concept of running through a store feels a bit alien. But even though I do that on my phone, it's kind of, it hasn't quite transposed to the desktop really for myself, really. Yeah. It's a bit...
And that they offer the possibility to upgrade, I think that's vital for its success. Because, again, that means that, you can try it, and if you don't like it, 50 quid or whatever, that's really not much for when you buy a PC for home use. For education, I can totally get that that's a lot of money if you need to upgrade a couple of hundred machines. But... I need to look into this. I wonder if you have a license agreement with Microsoft today, so that you're able to run Windows Education, would you be allowed, from a licensing point of view, to actually buy Windows 10s devices, and if required, upgrade them using your existing license agreement?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know.
I mean, so the licensing deal we've got with the software assurance with Microsoft is you can put Windows 10 Enterprise or Education Edition on any device that comes with an OEM operating system.
Yeah, and that should mean that you would be able to upgrade if needed from Windows 10s, and that would give you the benefit of not paying for the Pro license, which you would if you bought a PC with a Pro license. So from a price point of view, I believe it makes sense if the Windows 10s devices can be of the same quality as the Chromebooks, which from what I've heard, at least from some reviews and from colleagues that are working with Chromebooks, may not be the case.
Maybe the Surface laptop, but that's 900.
Yeah, and that's too expensive. I think that they tried to get that through, that this isn't the kind of device that are supposed to run Windows 10s.
Flagship device.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Google Pixel or whatever the name is for Chromebooks. But and that's a really common question I have received is, are we supposed to pay $1,000 for a device that can't run the applications we use? No, you're not supposed to do that. But I think they did their best to get that through, and they didn't succeed in the way they would have liked it, I guess.
Okay, so Windows 10s, you know, the jury is still out in that case.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Failure.
Yeah.
The jury is in. Then that's yeah. It's interesting though, because it is. I mean, Microsoft just kind of almost had to put some sort of skin in the game, really, for want of a better term, didn't they, to try and compete. So whether it goes the way of Windows Phone or whether it doesn't, there's an interesting one. So just I've got a few more things on my checklist to clear off. One of the things I was interested to see with the Windows 10 Creators Update. It has actually brought a few sort of cool things from a techie point of view. One of the things that stood out to me was you can now see in the task manager which service host process refers to which service, which from a techie admin perspective, I was like, wow, I don't have to go around randomly killing service host processes and possibly killing machines just to try and stop a service that's got itself in an errant state. But when I was looking at the deprecated features, because there is obviously, you know, the potential to deprecate features as well as put new ones in. Now, one of the interesting ones listed is the tile data layer, which we probably all know is what controls the kind of start menu database. And it looks like this is moving it towards a new model. It's still using the tile data layer, but it's using a couple of other folders within the user profile to store this data as well. One of them's called caches. I can't remember what the other one's called off the top of my head. So I think Microsoft have decided to alter the way they do this, and I'm not sure exactly where they're going with it, but it's an interesting one that they've almost kind of, it's in the process of development kind of as we speak, and we're using it. And talking about Enterprise State Roaming, as Dan mentioned before, there is a sync settings folder in there as well that seems to contain a copy of all of the databases that relate to the actual user state roaming. So I don't know whether that they're kind of almost getting ready to move the start menu into that sort of management technique or what, but it's interesting that, as we say, things are getting sort of pulled out from underneath us as well, because we put quite a bit of work in trying to use roaming profiles to roam the start menu, and now it looks like Microsoft have kind of changed their mind about that as well. So that's quite an interesting one to see in there.
They broke, for example, Citrix profile management with this change, I guess. Now in the latest release 5.8 that comes with Xen Desktop 7.14, they announced the support for Windows 10 Redstone 2, and I've read that a couple of guys had troubles with the Creators Update and Profile Management 5.7. I personally didn't try and test it, but maybe that's the reason this changes in the app tile data layer and all these databases.
Yeah, I think it raises quite an interesting point in that you're not just looking at what's coming in with every feature update. You've got to look at what's going out as well. So, you know, as I said, I probably said in the last discussions, users sometimes get used to little features, you know, maybe we don't use them, but users do, and then all of a sudden they get taken away. You know, you've got calls to the help desk, and you've got users that are a bit frustrated about it as well. But the other thing I wanted to say, I mean, we've got a couple of there's obviously, as Simon mentioned earlier, apparently they're going to change the naming for the servicing branches to something else. Is anybody aware of what it's going to be yet? Is it going to tie in with the SCCM ones?
Yeah, they will be called Semi-Annual Channel Pilot and Semi-Annual Channel Broad.
Oh, they roll off the tongue.
And it's probably the most stupid thing they could do. And I'm actually, and as you know, I'm probably the Microsoft guy in this gang. But as many have said in the Ask Me Anything thread on Microsoft Tech Community, we have spent 2 years trying to learn people how current branch and current branch for business works. And now they change the names. And if you look at what they also are changing, of course it makes sense, but they could actually have kept the names. The only good thing about this, it's probably from enterprise point of view, that it explains that the first 4 months of a release is considered a pilot. But again, look at a consumer point of view, and they are getting the pilot each and every time. From a marketing point of view, that can't be good.
Yeah,
you could name it beta testing branch.
Exactly, and it would scare people away. Yeah, so and it makes sense. They explained a couple of other things regarding support and such, but again, we need to change a lot of things. And now we have approximately 6 months or something to explain to our customers and colleagues and mother-in-law, for example, what this means.
Yeah, luckily my mother-in-law doesn't have a computer, so I don't have to have that one. But,
for Davis LTSB, this name did not change, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's about right. And we had that discussion last time. And looking at it, I believe that I still see your point of view in it, and I see the use case of LTSB in a virtualized solution. And I think Microsoft actually are trying to solve that, not with perhaps Windows, but with OneDrive, first of all. Looking at placeholders coming back again in the next Windows release. So LTSB is still the same. So if we have thought anyone about LTSB, that's still valid.
I think the creators update is somewhere around the corner for LTSB, because last time I checked on my LTSB Windows updates, they announced, would you like to get informed when creators update is available on my LTSB edition? So
yeah,
probably it will
makes
be
sense.
in August or September or something like this.
Yeah, and I guess it would be, they would release LTSB at the same time as they declare creators update. And I think that, I'm not sure if they will call it semi-annual channel broad or current branch for business. I believe it's current branch for business. I think Niehaus said that somewhere. So it would make sense. But speaking about that, we have talked about a bit about the news in creators update, and talked about modern management capabilities and such, and edge improvements. And you would if you run LTSB, you wouldn't get anything apart from Paint 3D or whatever.
yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? But I mean, it's almost like people, you know. I mean, I've started working with a few of the modern apps now, but again, I've only seen a couple of them, like VLC, Media Player, and Edge, and probably I can't remember what the other one was that I saw somebody using the other day. But there's not a lot of them out there that people are actively embracing. But you know, that may change in the future. So it just depends how people choose to approach that whole paradigm change, really. That's quite interesting, though. That's a bit of an interesting one about the change to the names, because I'm going to have to go off and update all of my presentations now. So,
yeah, that as well.
Excellent. Yeah,
I think probably my favourite new feature of the Creators Updates, the actual having the location bar or the address bar in the regedit.
Yes, I do like that.
That's great. That's great.
That's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Yes, that's one that's been, as I say, yeah. It's I mean, but the thing is, I haven't really actively started using it yet because I'm not used to not having it there. But yes, it makes things vastly easier when you're messing about with regedit. Right. So the only final thing I wanted to talk about briefly, which we obviously may have touched on in the earlier discussion that we had, is that what I mentioned earlier on, that some techie said he'd turned off all of his telemetry on his Enterprise edition of Windows 10 Creators Update, and then turned lots of tracers on and found that it was still sending lots of information back to all the places he told it not to go to. Which is, I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier on, didn't we? We were trying to say that telemetry is possibly a good thing if we can feed it into something. But, I mean, the whole WannaCry outbreak and things like that, people at security bonkers at the minute, and everybody's really concerned about every tiny little security detail. So should we have an option that turns telemetry off that actually does what it says on the tin?
But to be honest, if you look and read the documentation closely, telemetry off doesn't turn it off. It turns off everything except security, basically. You as far as I'm aware, you need to block security telemetry in firewalls.
Yeah, right.
So you won't be able to, from the client side, in any other way than from the firewall, be able to disable everything. Because if you look at it, if you run Pro, you will have basically basic or full telemetry. And if you run Enterprise, you will have security, basic, and full. And security means you'll only send basically Defender data. That's basically it, and nothing else. And I'm reading his article. It's quite interesting because some of these things are actually not good, like the IPv6 disablement, smart screen, and so on.
Yeah.
But telemetry disabled, yeah, it still connects to some servers. And that's by design. And I bet if you ask Microsoft, they would say, yeah, if you disable IPv6, we still need to check some things. To me, that doesn't make sense. But from a documentation point of view, I believe it actually does what it's supposed to do. And to be honest, again, I haven't read the article closely enough, but I'm not that surprised. And to be fair, if you look at WannaCry, it didn't affect Windows 10.
Yeah, that's right. But you know, everyone is now completely re-jerking towards security. I mean, it didn't even hit that many Windows.
About it.
Yeah, it didn't even hit that many Windows XP machines if you look at the statistics. And we've now got people saying, well, you know, that £10 million MRI machine that'll only connects to a Windows XP PC. Well, you better upgrade that. And they're kind of going, we can't. And it's probably that one. Like somebody said, it was probably the secretary's machines that got done rather than the actual sort of the ones that are on Windows XP. But what I did notice in that article as well was he said, were you suggesting blocking them at the perimeter firewall, Simon, or on the actual firewall sort of block on the machines themselves, or both?
I would say block it at the perimeter. I think that would be easiest to manage.
Yeah, because he said he put an exception in for something, and then when he restored the application, it removed the exception as well, and things like that. So
and that's a regular part of an application installation, I would say. Like I usually or previously dealt with many applications that did firewall exceptions, usually very quietly, which is not good. They should at least let me know we are opening this firewall port or whatever. But I guess if you restore an application, it really does then a reinstallation of it, and then it would go through the entire setup process and disable the same or enable the same firewall rules again. So that makes sense as well. Still, it isn't good. If you put in a firewall exception or whatever, it should be honored. But then again, it's something I would say in that particular case, I would say that that's something with the application in itself rather than Windows.
Yeah, that is.
And that would be solved if it were a universal Windows app. Then you would actually get a pop-up saying, yeah, you need to enable this rule or whatever. But still, it's again, I believe that Microsoft should be transparent in reply to articles like this. Yeah, great that you have tested this. The reasons why we do this is these.
Yeah,
they can't let it go unanswered.
Yeah, and if there's some time before, sorry, Dan, go on.
I was just saying they can't mean, with things like GDPR coming soon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We've got to be so transparent with the data that's kicking around and what's being collected. So I think Microsoft have to address it, or at least be transparent about it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
totally agree.
Could feed into that sort of telemetry and analytics that we were discussing earlier. But yeah, as I say, it's something that people are going to worry about, and that's a very good point, Dan, about GDPR. I'd completely forgotten about that, which I shouldn't have, because I'm doing a presentation on it in a few weeks' time. So, obviously not paying attention.
Yeah, and I think that's something Microsoft is working on quite hard, actually, both from an information point of view. I actually saw that it did, and the Enterprise Mobility team did a blog post on it yesterday, how EMS enables you to be or become GDPR compliant, which is a crappy word as well. But anyways, that's something they're working quite hard on, and I agree with you that's why they need to address this. Information is getting sent regardless of what this guy is doing. What information is being sent and why? And if that's stated, I know they have a huge white paper that came out with the Creators Update due to European demands. So it's like 70 pages or something explaining in detail every level, every setting, everything. So that should be available from the Microsoft website.
Yeah, what they'll have to do as well, if my GDPR interpretation is correct, is they'll have to specify a retention period for this data and things like that, because one of the GDPR things is it's not a right to be forgotten anymore. It's called a right to be deleted, I think.
Yeah, right to be. It's an opt-out scheme, isn't it?
Yeah, you can say to any company that holds any data on you, I want to request you delete everything you hold on me, and that's very interesting when it comes to archiving and backups as well.
Yeah,
I can't really see how that's going to be. Not going to be very easy to implement anyway.
Well, especially when there's other legislation that say you must keep data for 7 years in certain organisations and stuff. So it's like, well, how are you supposed to meet both? Which one's the cheaper fine to pay?
Probably not the GDPR one. But having said that, a lot of people are still waiting to see if GDPR actually has teeth. Are they going to actually apply the full rule of the law? But some of the things I've seen coming out of the ICO in the UK makes me think they probably are going to try and make an example of someone. So probably best not to be that company that gets chosen to make an example of. Right, cool. I think we've had quite a good discussion there, and I'm aware we're coming up to the end, and Dan is sitting in a disabled toilet, probably sweating.
I'm quite impressed by that.
What's scaring me is that I'm starting to get used to the smell now.
Excellent. That's right, guys. Thank you very much. I did worry because we have Synergy being on this week. We had a few people. James O'Regan sent his apologies. He got dragged into something at work, or he's probably just decided to fire up the barbecue and couldn't be bothered because it's such a beautiful day. Sorry, James, if you're listening back to this when I publish it, and you really did have some work to do. I'm only joking, mate. But yes, thank you very much, Rene. Thank you very much, Simon. Especially thank you very much to Dan for taking time out of your busy beer drinking schedule to sit in a sweaty cubicle with a headset on.
That's all right. I'm gonna go and get a nice pint, and then I'm going home.
Excellent, mate. I'll buy you a beer next time I say it. Thank you very much, guys. That's been excellent.
Cheers, everyone.